Hello, this is Christine Casey with this week's tour of the Honeybee Haven on the UC Davis campus in Davis, California. Watching bees can be fascinating. Today I'll introduce a bee watching activity that you can do at home in your own garden. If you were intrigued by the great sunflower project that I mentioned last week, this activity is for you. Observing and counting common bees is a good starting point for bee watching. Two bees you're likely to see in Central California gardens are the Valley Carpenter bee and the honeybee. Valley Carpenter bee females are the largest bee in the garden and solid black. Honeybees are the most common bee and range from golden yellow to brown. The two species look very different, so it shouldn't be too hard to tell apart on flowers while you're counting. Here's some other things to look out for when you're observing these bees. They'll often pick up pollen on their bodies that won't make it into the pollen baskets on their legs. On the left is a Valley Carpenter bee getting pollen deposited on her head each time she enters these sage flowers. Since carpenter bees are solid black, this yellow pollen deposit can cause observers to mistake her for a bumblebee. Likewise, the honeybee in the upper left has pollen on her face, which could lead her to be mistaken for a digger bee, which have white faces. There are different strains of honeybees that vary in color. Some are light yellow like the bee on the top right, while others are nearly completely brown like those on the bottom. Let's get started. One goal of watching bees is to answer questions about bees and plants. For example, do different bees prefer certain plants, or do different bees choose flowers of the same or different color, shape, and size? Start by deciding which flowers you'd like to watch for bees. In this example, we're watching flowers of different shapes and sizes to measure if this affects the bees that visit them. Flat flowers are just like the description. If you looked at them sideways, they'd look flat like a plate. These can be very small to as large as a sunflower. Long-shaped flowers are also just like their description. If you looked at them sideways, they'd look like a long tube. Remember that we're talking about the shape of individual flowers, not the entire flower cluster. The purple verbena flower clusters look rounded, not long. And when you look at the top of the flower, it certainly looks flat. But from the side, it's a long tube. Bees need to reach the pollen and nectar at the bottom of the flower, so it's definitely a long flower for them. Contrast this shape with the flat shape of the blanket flower. When scientists count animals, it's important to use a standard procedure that's followed each time. This way we know that the differences we see are not due to variation in how the counting was done. When you count bees, count it only when it arrives at the plant. Movement between flowers of a plant isn't counted. The bee should touch the flower to be measured. A close flyby doesn't make it. It helps to stand back so you can see the entire plant at the same time you're watching. Here's a honeybee on a catmint on the first flower. She moves to the second flower. That's not another count. That's still one bee because she hasn't moved from a new plant. And there she goes. Here's a sample of a counting form that's been filled out. You can make your own or find a link to this form in the video description. The form is for a 1-minute count of each plant. There will be lots of bees arriving during that time, so I find it's easiest to make tick marks for each and tally them when you're finished. In this sample, I selected 4 different flowers in the garden and counted them each 3 times today. After you've counted bees in your garden, what can you do with the information? Here's an example of averages that I calculated for the bees I observed today. Do this over time, and you'll get a good idea of the plants and flower shapes, sizes, and colors that the bees in your garden prefer. Happy bee watching! I hope this encourages you to keep watching bees and other insects wherever you see flowers. Please share and like if you found this useful. Just a reminder that there won't be a video next week due to the Memorial Day holiday. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.